Bill comes from you, our listeners. Bernstein. Since 2019, employees have impacted our community by giving more than 5,000 hours of volunteerism in Middle Tennessee. AllianceBernstein.com. Alliance Bernstein is not affiliated with National Public Radio.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. We just lived through the same thing, the worst power outage Nashville has ever seen. It was an ice storm that really did freeze the city in place for the better part of a week. While we all experienced it, everyone's experience was different. I'm sure you can attest. Even from one neighbor to the next, one house split in two by a tree. The houses next to it are basically unscathed. Some neighborhoods were in the dark and cold for nearly 2 weeks. Others never lost power. And for some, the ice was this major inconvenience. And for others, it threatened their entire livelihood and living situation. We're going to do a bit of an autopsy on the emotional anatomy of a collective crisis. We'll look at how we should process all that these last couple of weeks brought up, and we're taking your calls later this hour. So please be ready to share your insights and experiences that could maybe help the rest of us. We're going to start with our counselors, Kate Martin of the Estuary. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
And Ashley Hampton of Hampton House Counseling. Welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thank you so much.
No canceling today.
No
Let's talk about kind of this range of responses that happen to the same crisis. Ashley, like what kind of range have you seen? Whether that's folks who you're in a counseling session with, or just people who are chatting your ear off.
Yeah, I think for some people, something like this is a minor inconvenience. It's an inconvenience. And then I think for other people, it's totally a nervous system situation. It's much bigger than that. So I definitely saw a wide variety of responses.
Does that turn into like a physical response at some point with people?
I would think so. Yeah, I think anytime we're in a prolonged state of stress, it does impact our body. It impacts how we feel, how we sleep, what we're able to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Kate Martin, what about you? What have you seen?
Yeah, I think that this crisis is not unlike lots of other crises that we see in our society and our world. Like, it's impacting people unevenly. And so that is the kind of nuance that as a therapist we have to bring into the room of like, well, tell me how this is for you. I'm not going to assume that you had the same experience as everybody else. People during COVID, some people that I talk to are like, I feel guilty saying this, but COVID was some of the best times of my life because I was home with my family and I was able to work from home and like we had this togetherness. And other people are like, this tore my life apart. And so we just don't want to assume that everyone's like living the same life.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what have you found has been kind of hardest for folks in this particular crisis of kind of being without power, maybe damage to the home, life kind of grinded to a halt for a bit?
Yeah, I think part of the problem is the maybe inequity or the unevenness, like if I'm being expected to show up to work in the same way that my coworker is and I still don't have power and I'm, staying at a friend's house and my kids are out of school for, 6 days?
Yeah.
I'm having a different experience than somebody who, never lost power, only lost it for a little while. So I think that's hard. Like there are people who are still, like posting, we still don't have power. And you can tell that they feel like a little bit lost in the shuffle because everybody else is like back to life as usual.
It's amazing how quickly we can do that.
Well, we did it with COVID, like there are people whose lives will never be the same. And, other people who was kind of like, that was a blip and we moved on.
Right. Well, people who lost a very close family member to COVID, everyone else was like, well, maybe they could even talk about that time fondly.
Exactly. And that is kind of like, it's a little disorienting for people, I think, and I talk about this with clients a lot that, nuance is what we have to bring to all of the crises in our world right now. And the very thing that we lose when we're in a crisis is nuance, because nuance requires us to be somewhat stable in our nervous system, to be like, let me consider that other people have different experiences than me. We don't do that when we're in fight or flight. Like we just can't, So the very thing we need is like the biggest challenge. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Ashley, what about folks who, already deal with maybe anxiety on a good day? and then are faced with, some of the things that any kind of crisis presents them, like this ice storm.
Yeah, I think about like utilities as a regulator. If you have power, if you have lights, you can see. That actually makes a big difference. To be able to pour your cup of coffee that you drink every morning, that is routine, that's stability, that's grounding. And so we're all sitting there, and I don't know if this happened to you, but to me, it's like the lights went off and immediately my heart is like, okay, so there's no fan anymore. The sounds are gone. It's silent. How dark? When's it going to get dark? Did my coffee brew? I'm running to check. And I think those are like really small examples of how immediately, though, our nervous system does activate. And so there is a little bit of fear. And then there's that like, how long will this last? The not knowing, I think, is really ungrounding for so many people.
But at the same time, and we'll talk about this hour, what we're talking about is not having electricity primarily. I mean, that was most people's disaster. And it was cold in their house. Like, not the worst things on this planet. And yet, a real disruption. Like, how do you help people kind of deal with what is basically a first world problem?
So I think for some people who maybe are from marginalized identities, it is a compounded problem that actually can feel like a trauma. I think of folks who didn't have access to medications. I think about folks who couldn't, maybe even like food scarcity became an issue, mobility. How do I get to where I need to get to safety? So I think for some people, it actually was a serious issue where safety was actually threatened, which definitely impacts anxiety, depression, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and Kate, go ahead.
Yeah, I think beyond that, like beyond the sort of basic things of like some people needed, like their oxygen machine to work, which is electricity is sort of like a life and death thing for some people. Beyond that, I always talk about buckets. It's like some people have a bucket where they can take on a lot of stress because their bucket is just like not very full. Their bucket is pretty low. They've got a lot of room for more stress to come in, and they can still manage that. Other people, if you come to somebody whose bucket is already overflowing and then you knock out their power for a week and a half or 2 weeks, I mean, it becomes a full nervous system crisis, even if it is just, I can't have my morning coffee, or my kid is out of school and I don't know what I'm going to do about work and I have to find childcare. I mean, there are people in our communities who are on a razor's edge already, and so when then they're kind of tipped over, we have to understand what that's doing to them.
Wow. Yeah, it makes me think of you also have folks. You've got folks with the bucket full. You've also got folks with a bucket that's got plenty of room in it, and griping about the house being 40 degrees and thinking. And they're almost feeling this like privilege shame where they're like, oh goodness, I mean, our unhoused friends are dealing with the cold every night. How do you deal with that other level of, I don't know, call it guilt or something like that? Yeah,
I tell my clients there's no award for being the most like put upon human on the planet. Like we're not doing like the suffering Olympics. So I'm not living multiple lives all at once. I'm living one life. My life is the only life that I can be, present for right now. If my life is really challenging in this moment, it doesn't really matter that everyone else's lives are challenging. I mean, it matters, but it doesn't change the experience that I have of going through a trauma. And honestly, people do this at every level of trauma. I've had people who have survived horrific trauma sitting in my office being like, but I know that other people, and, Ashley's nodding because she is like the universal therapist experience.
Our trauma.
Yeah.
Well, explain that, Ashley. Yeah. Like, what is it just certain types of people who do that, or are we all kind of trained to, we're always comparing ourselves to others anyway, and you're like, well, I know other people have it worse.
I think it's a lot easier to think about who has it worse than to sit with your experience.
Oh.
And I think that we are built to survive. We are survivors. So I think when something happens and it is a trauma, it impacts us in such a way, I think it's only natural that our brain tries to minimize it so that we can get up in the morning and keep going. And so the comparison it's really a beautiful distraction from whatever we're experiencing. And to kind of go back to that idea of like people kind of looking like I have it worse or they don't have it. I always like to look at that as, yes, we're not the suffering. Did you say suffering Olympics? I love that. But also maybe that's a call to action, right? It's so, it feels, unstabilizing to us to see a need and not try to do what we can to help. So when we feel that feeling, instead of going into guilt, what would it be like to go into action? How can you show up and support someone if you have capacity? If your car was working, could you drop off a bag of groceries to someone? Like those kinds of moments, instead of wallowing or staying in that self like doubt spiral or cycle, what can you do with that is something I always think of.
Oh, I love that. Go ahead,
And
Kate.
it's regulating to our nervous
Yes.
systems to help others. Like there's a type of therapy called dialectical behavioral therapy. And one of the main pillars of that type of therapy is contribution. That when we're not doing well, when we're struggling, when we contribute to others, when we give to others, when we consider other people, we actually feel better. It's kind of just like altruism, there's a reason why altruism has been a part of human society since, the beginning, because it's good for everyone and it's good for us when we contribute. So.
If you're just tuning in, I'm Blake Farmer. This is Nashville. We're talking about the emotional toll of, what are we going to call this thing? The Great Ice Storm of 2026? I don't know if Fern is going to stick around or not, but Kate Martin's a counselor from the estuary. Ashley Hampton is from Hampton House Counseling. We're going to be taking your calls coming up, but right now you can chime in the chat at the video stream, youtube.com/@WPLN. Kate, talk to me about fear in the part of the brain. I don't know, when you add fear into a crisis situation, like what does that do?
Yeah, it's not good. I think that, like we talked about the buckets, some people are wired more for fear. We're sort of
that's their first response.
Yeah, I kind of talk about like how if we were cave people, like my natural tendency would be like the lookout. Because I'm like always scanning for danger. That's my natural personality, unfortunately. But it's useful, or it has been useful. There are things about it that are useful. But that, if I know this about myself, that I have a natural, propensity for finding danger and looking for danger, then when actual danger happens, even if it's minimal danger, I'm going to react to it more strongly than others. And so part of what we do in therapy is kind of just getting to know yourself, and being able to respond successfully to challenges. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I guess I'm thinking, there were people who, the lights went out and by the end of the day, they're like, we got to get out of here. You're like, well, it's not.
Seek higher ground.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, you'll be okay. You can sleep in this house. Yeah. And yet that's some people's first reaction. Ashley, can you talk about a term that I've heard called compounded trauma? Is that what you were getting at earlier, where people are, they've got several things going on. Their bucket's very full.
Their buckets are very full, and depending on who they are or what they're going through, and if we think about our Latinx community right now here in this country, I think the fear that we're already feeling is so heightened. To be in a community, to be here where you lose power, you really are losing the ways to take care of yourself and support yourself. And so that to me is a perfect example of compounded trauma, how this isn't just about power or inconvenience, but it's literally about survival.
Well, right. And we know, in fact, the timing of this was so interesting because, ICU nurse Alex Petty was killed on the streets of Minneapolis. Yeah. Like the day before, we started, getting frozen in, and there were really real impacts of that. For one, we know many people who fear deportation chose to stay home instead of go to like one of the city's warming shelters. We also heard from others on this show actually who had a pretty visceral response when the Tennessee National Guard was called in to help with the response. Even though, they were just bringing chainsaws, not coming to do immigration enforcement. But, what does that compounded trauma do over the long term?
I think it totally takes over your nervous system. It takes over your sense of well-being and literal survival. I think that we're going to see the effects of this for many, many years. I think people are really struggling with depression, with hopelessness, with fear. And that is fatigue. That's going to impact so many things in our community. And so I think compounded trauma specifically for marginalized communities right now, it's a real crisis.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing at once that like there'll be long-term effects, and then I sort of think about the effects that I have personally from COVID times, from the 2010 flood, from they hang around.
Yeah.
Kate, we're going to talk more about resiliency later on, but I think we all want to be more resilient. And my question is, does going through something like this necessarily make you more resilient?
No.
Okay.
No, it does not. Everything really hinges on how we move through traumatic experiences. So we can have a condition called flooding to our nervous system if we force ourselves through a really, triggering experience. A lot of people will think, well, I need to get over this. And so they'll do something because they think they need to get over it, and they're not resourced enough to do it. And so it actually ends up making the trauma worse, kind of more stuck in the body. I think something that I see a lot around resilience, or the most resilient people, are they've done shame work. Like they've cleared shame out of the picture, right? So they're not going to say, I don't know why I reacted so poorly to this ice storm. Nothing scary happened. They're going to say, it's okay that I had that reaction. My bucket was full, right? And so what can I do to make sure I'm resourced for the next time that something scary or triggering happens? And I'm not going to judge myself for it. I'm just going to say, this is my personal circumstances, and I'm going to, take care of myself.
Well, it's a beautiful place to end this first segment, and we're going to talk more about bouncing back. If I don't know, maybe that's a triggering term, but with our next guest. But we are going to say goodbye to Kate Martin of the Estuary. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for having me.
Ashley Hampton's going to stay with us. We're also going to start taking your calls. What kind of reaction did you have? We do want to hear. Were you surprised? What have you seen in your neighborhood? Was it anger? Was it more empathy? The number to join the conversation, 615-760-2000. You can also comment in the chat at our video stream, youtube.com/@WPLN. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners. And Amazon, proud sponsor of WPLN's daily show, This is Nashville. Engaging our differences so we can discover our unity. More on Amazon's community work at aboutamazon.com.
And Harpeth Hall, offering summer camp experiences in academics, athletics, and the arts for girls in kindergarten to 8th grade. Registration for 2026 summer camps now available at harpethhall.org.
And Belmont University's Master of Science in Applied Analytics, fully online and asynchronous, built to fit a professional schedule, designed to advance analytical skills and create impact across organizations. More at belmont.edu.
If you go hiking in the woods anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere, odds are you'll spot some chestnuts on the ground because they're everywhere. But that wasn't always true. Some researchers now say their global spread began under the Roman Empire when chestnut trees were farmed for lumber.
This was a revolution in the landscape.
That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 2 on 90.3 WPLN News.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. We don't want to take this metaphor too far, but we are dissecting the emotional anatomy of a collective crisis. Everyone in Middle Tennessee went through something over the last few weeks, but the experience was just so different for everyone. It's true of just about any crisis or disaster, and we're looking at how we responded and what we can learn to make us individually and collectively more resilient. We're going to welcome a couple more Nashville natives into the chat. We were just, we almost missed our cue here because we were talking, about going to Pearl High School and talking about Fountain Square here in Metro Center. Reverend Dr. Kate Fields is pastor of St. A's Chapel. Welcome to This is Nashville.
Thank you.
And Miss Anita Richardson has seen a lot of storms come and go as her community in Bordeaux has also changed. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And Counselor Ashley Martin of the Ashley is staying with us. Here's my question to listeners. What did you learn about your neighborhood or even your neighbors through this ice storm? Were you pleased? Were you disappointed? How did you see people lifting others up? What would you like to see more of? The number is 615-760-2000 or comment in the video stream, youtube.com/@WPLN. Anita, I may start with you. You've seen quite a few storms. In fact, this ice storm was not particularly hard hitting for your neck of the woods. But, tornadoes, floods, ice and snow over the years. Over time, how have you seen neighbors helping neighbors in town?
Well, I've seen neighbors actually go, like I was telling a lady yesterday.
Yeah.
I've seen people that come out and help, like my neighbors. I'll use them as an example. I had one neighbor she burns firewood, and she warms her home with wood. So she had told me before the storm, she said, if anything happens, the lights go out, be sure you and the kids come to my house. I had another neighbor who has a generator who lives right behind me who said, just throw an extension cord. We got you. So what I see is neighbors, people really are genuinely kind and they look out for each other.
It strikes me that there are people who maybe haven't put a big priority on knowing their neighbors well. And then something like this happens and you're like, oh, I don't know my neighbors and I actually need them right now. Are we losing any of that?
Yes, a lot of that has been lost in the shuffle. It really has been. I know my next door neighbor, the neighbor that lives in front of me, and two more that lives behind me. I don't know any other people on my street at all. I wave at them and say hello, and they do the same to me. But we don't really have conversations. Used to be a time when they saw you struggling with picking up something, they come over, wait a minute, you don't have to do that, I'll help you. But my neighbor looks at me sometimes and says, that was heavy, wasn't it?
Kate, community is a big deal to you. Can you have a strong sense of community when, like Nashville is doing, you're becoming more of I don't know if transient's the right word, but people moving in and out. It's weird that we have 4 Nashville natives sitting around this table.
It is. It's kind of unheard of sometimes to find that. Yeah, I think that with the influx of so many new folks, it's new relationships that have to be built. But I hope that something like this ice storm helps us realize that we've got to do that, right? That those relationships build resilience in a community way where you know that your neighbor has a generator and they're offering that to you. And it helps you not be lonely when you're hurting. And I think that really contributes to the capacity to get through something is when there's a mutual belongingness, when you belong to each other, when you've got a problem, I got a problem too.
Yeah.
And so I hope that this helps us remember if you aren't in a community, it doesn't have to be a faith community, it can be any sort of community, that you will get in a community and that you will invest in it and let them invest in you. And when something like this happens, we take care of each other so much, all the better when we know each other.
Yeah. I'm guessing there are listeners who are thinking, yeah, I know more of my neighbors today than I did 2 weeks ago, but because of all of this, not a bad thing. We'd love to hear about it. If you want to join us on air, the number is 615-760-2000. The YouTube stream, which is at the WPLN YouTube page, is a good place to put comments as well. Let's go to the phones. Barbara in Fairview, you're on This Is Nashville. Go ahead.
Hi. I am actually a Nashville native, and so in 1994, we had a nice storm, just like Fern, and I lived in Inglewood and had no power for 13 days, and it was pretty traumatic for me because I had a baby.
Yeah. So you're saying 30 plus years later, it's still a thing that you takes you right back there with worrying about. Well, we even had on the show some folks last, I guess 2 weeks ago, who were dealing with just a few day old baby that they had brought home to a house. What has this kind of brought back to you that surprised you?
Well, I did lose power just for one day, and I was so thankful. It just reminded me, I was worried my power was going to go out for a long time because trees were falling out there a lot.
Yeah,
So
especially in Fairview.
it was, it was really just brought up that memory of the ice storm of '94. So I just wanted to call and let you know that.
Thank you, Barbara. That's just what we're looking for. Really appreciate it. The number to join her is 615-760-2000. Let's take another call. Here's Nathan calling in from East Nashville. You're on the show. Go ahead.
Yeah. I've lived in Inglewood, so your last caller said that as well. I've lived in Inglewood now for about 13 years, and I'm sad to say that almost any weather seems to trigger me and, frankly, the collective of my neighborhood around loss of power, loss of utility. We were lucky this time. We were the lucky few that kept our power and our heat and our internet the whole time. And, from that came this tremendous sense of survivor's guilt. And I really sort of channeled that survivor's guilt into calling to task the powers that be that are supposed to protect these systems that keep us all safe and alive. And, as a result, I started thinking about what are the things that we do to protect other important systems in our world and our lives. We stress test banks, as an example, to make sure that they aren't going to collapse on us and take all of our money with us. And there isn't presently at least not that we've been made aware of, and that sort of comes to the next point about communication, there isn't presently a tool that I'm aware of that Metro uses to test the infrastructure that keeps us all safe, healthy, alive, warm. And so we don't stress test our systems. And, we have, the city of Nashville has spent, the entirety of my existence in the city, which is now almost 18 years, being reactive to everything, not proactive, at least in a meaningful way. And I'm hopeful that this storm will be the catalyst that takes Nashville to a place where they start thinking proactively about line burial, about all sorts of things. The warming shelters didn't open for 48 hours until after the power went out.
Yeah, they went ahead and did. Yeah, it was the fire halls and the police stations that opened up initially. Yeah, you've got a good point, Nathan. We'll take that and run with that. I really appreciate the call. And you're right that we have been reactive, but people also quickly forget. I'm thinking of the years after the 2010 flood. There was a big price tag to build a wall to protect downtown from another flood and a pumping system. And that's not happened, and it probably won't because we move on. Anita, you've seen things come and go. Like, I don't know, while we do remember things like the 94 ice storm, we also forget. Why?
Absolutely. Because it was hard for me to remember. What year was that?
Right.
But yes, we forget, not because I don't think we really forget it. I think what we do, we just put it away because you don't want to think negative. You want to keep those good vibes going around. So you actually, you just put it on the back burner until you see it again.
Yeah. Do you think anything's changed related to the expectations of our local or state officials to do something for us, to take care of us in a crisis? Have you seen that change over your
I have. I actually
years?
saw, maybe I didn't realize it before, but I actually commend, what's his name?
Our mayor currently? Yeah, Freddie O'Connell.
O'Connell. I'm sorry.
No, Cooper
O'Connell.
was before.
But he was the one that I actually saw him actually putting things in order.
Yeah.
Trying to make it for not happen again.
Yeah. Ashley Hampton, let me come back to you because, this whole thing of like sort of trying to protect ourselves, to try to prevent anything bad from happening. I can see why one would want to do that. And yet we also sort of know who knows what the next crisis is going to be. How would you talk to somebody who is like Nathan saying, we could have defended against this?
Well, I mean, I don't know if we could have defended against this, but I do think it brings up the question to me is what can each of us individually do to protect ourselves for something like this in the future? So, for example, I actually love fear. Fear is like one of my favorite emotions because to me, fear keeps me safe. And so I don't need to dwell in fear, but the things that I am afraid of, I can kind of sit with and kind of do a little inventory. So it's like when day 4, when I didn't have power, you better believe I was like, how much are generators? How much would I need for a generator? Well, I'm going to start saving for a generator because if this ever happens again, I will have a generator. And so I think there's a level of some of it we don't have control over, but what can we start doing in case these things do start to happen, which I mean, I think it could happen more and more.
Right. Well, I mean, as we understand our climate more, I think we're learning this kind of thing probably does happen more frequently. Let's take another call. Ellie in Nashville. In fact, can we call you a friend of the show now, Ellie?
Yes.
Ellie called in. I think this was the first day. But when we were figuring out what was going on with the ice storm, and you had found your way to a warming shelter, I hope you found your way back home. Give us an update.
Well, my excitement coming back home was quickly met with a flood in my kitchen and water pouring out of my ice ceiling. And
frozen pipe situation?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what we believe. I have not had time yet to actually get a plumber over here because there's been so many things that I've had to do.
Wow. Have you been able to live in the house?
Yeah, I got some different things to, I immediately had the main water valve shut off.
Right.
And then I've been drying out the areas with I bought a dehumidifier and some other things that are known for trapping moisture and taking it out of the floor and everything.
Wow.
And
so you've got a ways to go still.
I really can't. My situation that has left me shaken is that I really can't afford a lot of hiring professionals to do things, and I have to save that for the plumbing. So I can't have a company come in and take care of the humidity because that money has to be saved for the plumbing.
Yeah. Ellie, I'm sorry that you're dealing with this, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who are nodding along and saying, yeah, I'm kind of stuck in limbo right now, too, trying to figure out what I can afford to get fixed because, as we know, insurance, depending on what happens, it might not necessarily be covering this. Kate Fields, especially as a pastor of a church, like how are organizations like churches responding to like specific needs like Ellie's?
Well, I don't know. I know that, many churches have ways in which to help our folks out, financially. You mentioned the fire halls that were open. Churches were too during, many churches were warming stations. Many faith communities of any kind had power and they opened their doors and they said, come get a cup of coffee, come sleep here, whatever you need to do. We did that because we were on Vanderbilt's campus and we had power. And so I guess I just want to say that, we can take care of each other so much easier when we know each other, when we already have that relationship prior to the natural disaster, prior to the traumatic event. And so when you're part of this faith community or community of any kind, and you're aware. I mean, we had congregants who went and stayed with each other, took generators to each other. It was easy because we were already so connected. We were already on a group text, It was as easy as a text.
Right.
Yeah, Anita, have you experienced that?
There was one church. We heard about it on Facebook. They gave away generators, coats, blankets, you name whatever a person would need in that storm. I heard about it too late to even go think about a generator.
I see.
But and fortunately, I did not have to deal with the generator on my lights. Didn't go off. But there were some people that I wish I could have given a generator to, but they live way on the other side of town. I don't drive in ice.
Yeah.
I had a bad wreck in ice before, so I don't do it. But I would have found someone that could have.
Right. But it strikes me that it's like there are people who have capacity to give in these times, and yet if there are others in need, but they're not connected to you got a problem.
Right, because the telephones if you didn't have lights,
it's true.
Eventually your cell phone was out.
Yeah.
Because I had an aunt who was in that situation. So we called the wellness check. We called and made a wellness check on her. She was at a neighbor's house, but she heard them knocking on her door, so she went and found out that they were looking for her. And she still didn't go to the shelter. But anyway, that's horse of another color.
You can only help so much. We need to take one quick break. Several folks are waiting on the line. Please stay with us. We'll get to you right after the break. We're talking about the emotional toll of this crisis that, as we've been hearing, is not at all completely behind us. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners. And Vanderbilt Blair School of Music presenting an evening with double bassist Edgar Meyer and saxophonist Chris Potter, Sunday, March 1st, their first ever collaborative concert event, live in Ingram Hall. Tickets available at blairtickets.com. And The Higgins Firm, assisting clients with nursing home neglect and serious personal injury cases. Online at thehigginsfirm.com. And Gardens of Babylon Landscapes, dedicated to turning inspired ideas into beautifully designed gardens and outdoor living spaces, plus a downtown garden center to explore year-round. More at gardensofbabylon.com.
Sometimes WPLN's reporting ends up in surprising places.
Tennessee's Department of Children's Services has been documenting the improper use of seclusion at the Bean Center for years, and yet they've continued to approve their license to operate.
That's John Oliver talking about our investigations with ProPublica into detention centers locking kids in solitary confinement. And I'm criminal justice reporter Paige Flager, bringing you deep dive investigations that you trust here on WPLN News.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. We're wrapping up our show on resiliency and taking your calls. What did you learn about your community through the ice storm, the extended power outage? What disappointed you about how people handled adversity? What made you proud? What has you mourning? What's bringing you encouragement? We need some of that. The number is 615-760-2000. You can also chime in at the video stream from the studio here at youtube.com/@WPLN. A quick update about some resources available to people recovering from the ice. Today, Metro Nashville's opening 2 disaster assistance centers at the Hadley and the Smith Springs Regional Centers. Staff there will help connect residents in need with food, healthcare, other resources. At this point, FEMA, as in the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is not involved. Federal aid has been granted in Tennessee, but only for governments and nonprofits, not yet to individuals, though there is still a request out. We'll see. There is money to help with rent or mortgages through the Metro Action Commission. Applicants must be residents of Davidson County, have to have been impacted by the storm, and meet some income eligibility requirements. And importantly, applications are due Thursday, so coming around pretty quick. There are links through the Metro Action Commission website or through the Winter Housing Assistance Program. That's the name for it. And then lastly, families who lost food because of Winter Storm Fern and receive federal benefits through Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as SNAP. our understanding is you should get additional money. The U.S. Department of Agriculture made the announcement yesterday. Officials say SNAP households may have a portion of their January benefits replaced, assuming that you lost that food. They also asked the state of Tennessee to go ahead with automatic mass replacement rather than having households have to report losses individually. That's for 8 counties, including Davidson. So those are largely for the physical needs, but what we've been talking about is the emotional toll of this crisis. But, of course, it goes hand in hand with the physical. Counselor Ashley Hampton, Reverend Kate Fields, and Miss Anita Richardson are with us. And we're kind of in listening mode here. Let's take a few phone calls. Nadine from Berea Babe, you've been waiting patiently on the line. Another friend of the show who we talked to a couple of weeks ago. Can we get an update? How are things with Berea Babe?
Hello. We're chugging along as best as we can. Sorry, my voice sounds a little off. I just got sick, of course, on top of trying to find a new house. But we're chugging along, figuring our lives out. I'm actually in front of a unit that we just saw, one of the houses, to try to find a new home.
And remind me, this is because so you were having to shut down your pop-up your food truck. And then your home had a frozen pipe situation, and you're saying you're now having to move out?
Yeah, so unfortunately, our lease was ending in the end of February, and since the amount of construction on the house would probably take about 4 weeks, it made no sense for us to keep renting, so our landlord was able to terminate our lease a little earlier. And we were able to leave that kind of construction zone that was our house. So now we're trying to find a real house that isn't a construction zone.
But you are now houseless, sort of, so that's another thing.
Yeah, and it just kind of paused our business. I mean, we're not able to even touch our cooking and our business until we can figure out where home is. We're staying with family in Clarksville right now, but we're driving back and forth and just seeing places. Usually I rent, and I usually take about 3 months to find a new place when I decide to move. So this is kind of compacted into hopefully 3 weeks or less.
Well,
so hard.
Best of luck. Ashley, I'm wondering if there's any truth to kind of this when it rains, it pours phenomenon and how you help people navigate when it just, what's next, that kind of moment.
Well, I think that first, I always think it's important to just like pause and it's okay to be overwhelmed. I think what we haven't talked about a lot, but I kind of heard in those last calls, it's like the financial toll that this takes and truly like how debilitating it is, how powerless we actually are. And so when I feel overwhelmed like that, I often think like, what is the next best thing? What is the next best thing that I can do?
Because you're thinking you got to solve all these problems right now.
And for some people, they don't have the luxury of solving their problems right now. I have 1,000 tree branches down in my backyard. I look at them. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do with these branches right now. It's just that's not the next best thing for me. So I'm going to let my neighbors that's their resource. That's what they need right now. You get the trees. Eventually I'll get to it. And so I think really the idea of slow and small tangible tasks that you can do is actually going to help create that sense of agency, control, and maybe reduce some feelings of overwhelm. But I do think it is an overwhelming time.
Well, let's take a few more calls. Ashley here in Nashville, you're on the show. Go ahead.
Hello, the other Ashley.
The other Ashley. Ashley, meet Ashley.
I love it, Ashley.
Go ahead.
I work in municipal finance, and NES over 30 years ago tried to propose a bondage to make the grid more resilient. And also they wanted to do what we call catastrophe bonds, which are kind of like insurance.
Yeah.
But because NES gets all its revenue from ratepayers, no tax money goes to NES.
Right. In other words, they're not like in the metro budget. They just use the money they get from us who pay our bills.
They get the money from us to provide us with power, and they buy it all from TVA.
Right.
And of course, gas is totally separate here in Nashville. So if we want resiliency if we want a catastrophe fund, we can have it, but we have to pay for it in our rates.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, it's a good point, Ashley. It's one thing to say we should prepare, and then when they say, well, here's the $20 surcharge on your monthly bill. It's a different discussion, isn't it? Ashley, really appreciate the phone call. Let's work in one more call here. Mary in Clarksville, you're on the show. Go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I'm not from Nashville. I haven't been affected by this, and you kind of already answered my question. But I just don't understand how there's this money available that well, not available, but there's money. There's a $2 billion rainy day fund. There's $60 million heading our way.
You're saying in the state budget?
Yeah, the rainy day fund. I don't know how many disasters we've been through, and that has not been accessed.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I think at least the state is really hoping that the federal coffers will open to help individuals, and you haven't even heard any proposal to maybe dip into the rainy day fund to help folks out. But you make a good point, and a lot of people point out the rainy day fund for any number of things that the state is not doing. So, Mary, really appreciate the insight. Kate, I'm wondering, are we, in this idea of turning to government to try to solve things all the time? You work for a church, and yet a church can only do so much. Like you're not going to harden the electrical grid in Nashville, right? So, like, what should we expect of our government, and then where does their role kind of stop, and community organizations pick up?
I think we should expect their best as we were giving our best. I think we all have to come around the table. I think it takes faith communities to be at the table. It takes the government. It takes all the things, all the entities to coordinate well, because these sorts of weather events are going to keep happening and they're going to become more frequent. And if we have community resilience, it's going to take the factors. It's going to take, all of the different organizations. The food system is a big part of this, right? I do a lot of work in the food system. We've got to have our nonprofits come to the table and the government. And if we can work together in a sense of like common good, for the common good, then I think we can be more on the same page when something like this happens. And we can certainly have better communication at the very least, and be ready for what's going to come down the pike, because it is going to come down the pike with the weather. Yeah. And so I hope this taught us something. I hope we're not the same after this insofar as our resources. I hope we become better. That's my prayer.
Anita, have you heard much of, I don't know, I think people often are looking for someone to blame when hardship arrives. Do you get the sense people are more in the blaming mode these days than maybe decades ago?
Yes. When the lights went out in, 1990?
Are we talking about the ice storm in
94?
1994, yeah.
As you listen to the lady that called in, she was out for 13 days, and you can only hope that it'll get better, but you can't always blame the government or NES even though that's their job. We had NES guys that got killed even trying. So
we have so much more information now about what's going on. I mean, even though power was out and a lot of people didn't have access, but a lot of people could watch. They could stream a press conference live on their phone. They could look at an outage map.
What happens if the satellites go out?
Yeah.
We keep on trying to find a way. I think the simple things are the things we did back in the day. We just took care of ourselves and each other. And that's basically all we can do. Because, like Kate said, things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And like Ashley said, you eat at them a little at a time. You can't just take this big, overwhelming problem and fix it all. Because if that was the case, we wouldn't have a problem.
Yeah. Ashley, can you sort of help us with deal with this issue that people might have this feeling of of a little bit of anger and wanting to say, someone should have done this, someone should have done that. How do you help people deal with their tendency to point fingers?
So anger is my second favorite emotion.
So fear you love.
Fear, I don't love fear, but I know fear, right? Anger I love because to me, anger says something really matters and we're fighting for something. And this conversation has made me feel like I want to fight for community, right? I want to fight for sending a note to my neighbors, even if we don't, in my neighborhood, maybe I don't speak the same language as my neighbor, but could I Google translate a note so they at least know my name and my phone number? And so I think, again, anger is a powerful emotion that makes us want to fight. But what is it that we're really fighting for? And that's the question that I always ask people. What is it that you're fighting for? Are we fighting for safety? Are we fighting for accessibility? Are we fighting for community? That's kind of what I'm going to walk away thinking about.
But yeah, it's going to be ringing in my ears, this idea of like, okay, if we want to make sure we're connected to the community, how do we start that so we're not, sending a Google translated message to our neighbor who we didn't know before?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And being proactive.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you bringing that in.
Well, Kate, can you help us think through practically how you do this? Let's say you're the person who's sitting at home in the cold and thinking, I really don't know what it is we're going to do. And I don't really feel like I know the people around me well enough to ask a big time favor, whatever that might be. Where do you start?
You start with a good casserole, I say. You take them a casserole, you say, this is who I am, this is what's in the casserole in case they have a food allergy. And then you get to know them over food. Food is the best connector of us because you sit around the table and you're all on the same playing field and you get to know each other. And I think you stop believing fantasies about each other and you get to know each other for who you are. And then you're not scared of each other and you can trust each other that when something bad happens, they care about that. And I can give them a call. And so I sure hope everybody who's listening has somebody like that they can call, that they trust, that they're in relationship with, that they belong to, and that they can invest in and be invested in. And if you don't have that, I hope that you find that in some capacity.
Anita's going home to work on some casseroles, get that neighborhood pulled together. Or are you going to be receiving casseroles?
Both. A little both.
We're
going to share. We'll have a potluck.
Oh, I love that.
All right, a potluck is maybe the perfect place to end this. What a quick hour. We had so much more to get to. I've got many more questions we just didn't get to. Some voicemails we didn't get to because the conversation was so good. Thank you so much, Ashley Hampton, Kate Fields, Anita Richardson. Thank you for joining us to really kind of unpack the emotional anatomy of a collective crisis. Please come back.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners, for calling in, for leaving us messages as we prepare for this program. It really, it just makes it a meatier moment here on the radio dial. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. Special thanks to Chaplain Darren Johnson and Miss Kiva Smith for their help with this episode. If you missed yesterday, we were inspired by Chef Erica Feiser's resilience, reopening her restaurant after a mass shooting and overcoming so much in her own life. You can listen in the podcast feed or at thisisnashville.org. Today's episode produced by Tasha A.F. Limley, our managing editor, also working the cameras today. Mary Mancini's on the phones. Board operators Liv Lombardi. Masterminds behind that theme music are Larange and Namir Blade. Tomorrow, tune out in as we talk about a different kind of ICE. It's an episode all about immigration enforcement and knowing your rights. This is Nashville. I'm Blake Farmer. Go in peace.
The Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Vanderbilt University, where adults over 50 come together to learn, connect, and explore, with non-credit courses, cultural programs, local explorations, and trips. OLLI covers a wide range of subjects from history, science, politics, religion, to the arts, and more. Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, a community of lifelong learning and friendships, where curiosity meets community. Spring courses begin on March 6th. Registration at vanderbilt.edu/OLLI.